I think we live in an era of false flags. Particularly since the Second World War is when false flags truly became done with sophistication, almost like a science. And the leader of them is certainly the United States. If there were an Olympics of false flags, the U.S. would get the gold. Israel would get the silver, and I think Britain would probably get the bronze. You know, what that means is it's the U.S. and its closest strategic allies are the leaders. I'm not seeing many false flags coming out of Russia, for example. Now, at one point when I realized that a lot of these false flags were American-initiated or initiated by America's strategic allies, I started asking myself, well, why is this so? I think the answer is, at least in large part, because the United States is at a point where it is this close, I think, to total global domination. So it's America's game here, and they're trying to eliminate all rivals. To do that, they need to control all of the resources of Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia, that stretch of the world. It is essential to take control over all of it. If you're going to have wars that could not otherwise be justified, you need to have at least access to false flags. Because the thing is, you've got to be able to engage the population enough to convince them that these types of wars are necessary. And the only way you're really going to do that is, at least at times, the ultimate propaganda weapon in the toolkit, and that's the weapon of the false flag. You kill people, you blame it on another party, and you say it is necessary for us to do something about this, to save lives, you know, for democracy and for whatever, when in fact the real reason is to take over oil fields or to steal money out of bank accounts or to secure, you know, geographic areas for pipelines, natural gas pipelines, and things like that. The other reason that there's only a few nations that do false flags is, A, you need really top-of-the-line covert operations teams. And the U.S. has certainly got them. Israel certainly got them. Britain certainly got them. But the other problem that you have is you need to have total control over mainstream media. You must have total compliance. And Russia does not have that with the global media, by and large. The United States does. Britain does. Israel does. They can be assured when something goes down, they're going to have a totally sympathetic global media that will work hand in glove with them, and that will basically block out uncomfortable questions and the like. And I think that is why the United States is the leader in false flags these days. They've got the motivation, they've got the ability, and they've got control over the media, which is essential. One of the things, for example, that I'm noticing with these false flags is the creation of slogans, almost like a marketing campaign. So we have Je suis Charlie, you know, with Charlie Hebdo shootings. We have with the Boston Marathon bombing, the slogan Boston Strong. And it's a mind control thing. It's all propaganda. It's a way of getting inside people's heads, screwing with their heads, using those emotions, this feeling of tragedy that everyone shared on that day, and using it against us. That's really what these slogans are part of, these false flag operations, I think. The other thing to be wary of with a false flag is whenever you see the media instantly jumping on the culprit, instantly identifying who's responsible, be wary. There's something very suspicious about this, and we see this more and more. Something big happens, something dramatic and shocking happens, and boom, we know who did it right away. But the level of evil that we are talking about here with something like a false flag, I really think most people they just can't conceive of it. And they don't want to. When you learn about something like false flags, that just opens up an entire world of responsibility that I think most people would just prefer to avoid, to be honest with you.
anthrax scare of late 2001 was widely seen as a follow-up to the 9/11 attacks, and a sign of things to come at the dawn of the so-called War on Terror. Beginning in late September and continuing for several weeks, multiple anthrax-laced letters were mailed to various media offices and the offices of 2 US senators, killing 5 and injuring 17. It did not take long, however, for the neocons in the Bush administration to start insinuating that the anthrax scare was tied to their 2 favorite boogeymen, Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden.
And this fit with a narrative which certain people had been trying to push from very early. And that set things up very nicely for 2 invasions, of course, Afghanistan and Iraq.
The only problem with that story is that it was a complete lie. As we now know, of course, the anthrax attacks were a false flag event. By early 2002, it was confirmed that the anthrax had sourced to the US Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, a key facility within America's own bioweapons program. And that false flag was aided by the government officials and corporate media talking heads who were happy to propagate this false story in the lead up to the war in Iraq. The legacy of that war remains with us today. The Middle East, including Iraq itself, remains in chaos, a direct result of the illegal invasion and occupation of that country. An invasion and occupation that was sold to the public on the back of brazen lies and outright fabrications. The anthrax attacks themselves remain a case study in how a false flag event can be used to whip the public into hysteria and be led into supporting illegal wars of aggression.